Welcome to the show. You're listening to In Tune with Tony B on FM 88.7 and 90.3 Radio Northern Beaches. You can also live stream at rnb.org.au, and you can listen to all of my programs on demand at www.mixcloud.com/In Tune with Tony B. And today we have the great pleasure of chatting with Louise Hall, Partnerships and Program Coordinator with MacKillop Family Services. MacKillop Family Services embodies the spirit of Mary MacKillop, a woman for all Australians. Their work is motivated by Mary MacKillop's principle, never see a need without doing something about it. Louise is going to chat to us about the wonderful programs that MacKillop Family Services helps facilitate. A great example of the programs they run is Seasons for Growth, which is aimed at supporting children and young people who are struggling with experiences of change, loss and grief. And the reach is pretty much anywhere where people experience change and loss. Louise, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Tony. Nice to be here.
So before we get right into it, do you want to tell us a little bit about Louise Hall and give us a bit about your background?
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm obviously from the UK, from the northwest of England. I emigrated here about 15 years ago. I'm a social worker, so I've worked with children and young people and families for probably 20 plus years now. And I started working at MacKillop Family Services about 4 years ago. So during my career as a social worker, I've worked with in lots of different areas. So in child protection, working with children and families where children have additional needs or disability, and working in family support. And so my natural thing that I'm interested in really is supporting families holistically, so looking at all the different ways that we can work with children and their families and that wider community. I feel like I've always really enjoyed the work that I do and look for new challenges, and that's really how I came in to do the work with Good Grief, because I was running lots of groups for families, for children and parents, and when I saw the role at Good Grief, I thought this is a way to actually spread that a little bit wider, because we train professionals in the programs and then they run them in the community. So the reach is really far and wide, and it's just been fabulous seeing the rollout of the programs and just how it's supported so many communities. So the Seasons for Growth programs, they're change, loss and grief programs. So we train people in the programs, and it started about 26 years ago now. And it was the Sisters of St. Joseph who saw that need, and we talk about Mary MacKillop, who is behind our work, and how she was really ahead of her time in St. Mary MacKillop. You know, she saw a need, and that's one of the things we talk about, never see a need without doing something about it. And about 26 years ago, the Sisters of St. Joseph saw that need for children and young people where parents had been divorced or where there had been a bereavement, and there weren't programs or supports available. And so they worked together with Professor Anne Graham, who's very involved with our programme. She's the programme author, to design the Seasons for Growth programmes. And the programmes grew from there. And we know, and we keep saying this number, but we know over 300,000 children have gone through the programmes. And since then, we had then had requests for, well, what about us as parents? What about us as adults with our grief and loss? And then we obviously have natural disasters and other events that have occurred. So the programmes have been going strong for a long time. And they've developed over the years, and we're obviously doing a lot more in that space now as we respond and see that need and respond to it for other events that have occurred, like the natural disasters and COVID, for example.
I really like the saying of Mary MacKillop, never see a need without doing something about it. That's fantastic. And like you say, that's way ahead of our time. It's all about being proactive to do something great for other people. Can you tell us a little bit more about each of these programs and how they work? So let's maybe talk about Seasons for Growth, and how does that actually work in practicality?
Okay, so we actually train professionals. So we're across Australia, but we're also in the UK and Singapore and New Zealand. So the programs have a really wide spread. We train professionals in the programs and then they run them. So for example, in schools, we train school teachers, chaplains, school counsellors, psychologists, anybody in that kind of wellbeing space, and they would then run the programme with the children and young people there. So that particular programme runs from 6 to 18 years, and then we have an adult programme as well. So the Seasons for Growth adult programme supports adults from 18 years upwards, and that runs in New South Wales corrections, it runs in mental health projects, domestic violence projects, community organisations. So any place where people have had a change and loss. And we're often really good at identifying change and loss and grief where there's bereavement. But our work covers a lot of different changes and losses. So it can be family separation, relocation, big events that have happened. For children, often it can be a loss of a pet, a bereavement in the family. Maybe they've moved house. We work with a lot of children in out-of-home care, children with a refugee background, and obviously their families as well. So really the aim is that wherever there's a need, that's responded to, and then that further reach as well to support parents, to support their children and to support community members so that communities feel stronger and there is a place to talk about these changes and losses that often have a really profound effect on people.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because a lot of people, when they think of grief and loss, they always think of that the worst case scenario, or death or whatever it might be. But really, it can be any major change in someone's life, isn't it? And what could be a loss of a job, could be it could be anything.
Yeah, and it can even be some of those plan changes, those life transitions that we plan. So we may decide that, we're really looking forward to retirement, and then that has a really big impact because there's a change of routine, a change of identity. So even the things that we think are really positive changes in our lives, we can still have a grief reaction to that. And we're trying to make sure that that language is used so that we widen that language, and particularly for children and young people where it can come through where they understand and they find that missing piece of the puzzle around how they're feeling, and that helps to support them into adulthood, because we do meet a lot of adults who say, I wish I'd had this when I was younger, I didn't realise I was grieving, and actually that makes a lot of sense. So it can be those big life events that we don't choose, and it can equally be some of those transitions into new things that we're trying where we actually feel quite mixed feelings about them that we didn't expect. So having the opportunity to discuss them really helps us to kind of find our way and work out what we might need.
And that's the key, isn't it? Being able to talk about those things.
Yeah, that's right.
And you also run a couple of other different programs as well, particularly for First Nations people and also people that have been affected by natural disasters. Can you tell us a little bit more about those particular programs as well?
Yeah, so our adult programme called Seasons for Healing is for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander adults. And that programme runs a lot in communities, and we work with communities to plan that training and those programmes so that we can offer that support locally, and it's really community-led. And that's the basis of all our work, really, that we build capacity in communities, but we only go to communities where we're invited. So we work with the education departments, corrections, as I said, lots of other local organisations where they ask for the programme or they're interested in that. So it's really about people being ready and wanting that support. We don't put that support onto people. The Stormbirds programme is our natural disaster programme, and that was designed following the Black Summer bushfires. Sorry, no, that's wrong. The Black Saturday bushfires. And recently we rewrote that programme following the bushfires, the Black Summer bushfires. And that certainly helped a lot of people following the bushfires, but also following the floods recently, because it would cover any kind of natural disaster. So we've been supporting a lot of communities through different fundings there. And that support continues. And we've also had our Seasons for Healing and our Seasons for Growth adult programmes in those communities too, to support the wider family and communities. And for some bushfire impacted communities, because of COVID, some of that support was held up, so the groups are still running, obviously. And with grief and loss, we know it doesn't really go away. We build our life around it. So often it can be years after that people access support at times.
I imagine you've been very busy with all the recent natural disasters, the floods, COVID and all those sort of things.
Yeah, definitely. I think COVID has added another layer to really complex situations for people anyway. So we were really busy with our programmes generally, because there is a lot of change and loss in people's lives. There's a lot of family separation, high rates of divorce and separation. Obviously, there's lots of changes and transitions happening generally for people and bereavement. But then we had that overlay of natural disaster for a lot of communities impacted by the bushfires and drought and now the floods. And then we've also had the overlay of COVID, which have actually held up a lot of that recovery for people. So we've been offering support in that space too. And with the big lockdowns, that's been a big impact for people. They haven't been able to access the support that they may have had previously.
And it's certainly good to be able to give people this awareness of what you can do. Is this an Australia-wide program?
So the program is Australia-wide. So we have trainers in each of the states, but we've done a lot of training online because of COVID, and that's actually opened up another door really, because we've always trained in different capital cities and wherever we've been invited to go and train. But for a lot of communities, it'd be difficult to get to training if, for example, if they're in really rural or regional areas. So training online has actually opened up the program to people who wouldn't have been able to get to it. So we do a mix now of face-to-face and online training, and we've been very mindful around the self-care aspects of that in terms of discussing grief and loss, because people will come to the program training because they want to support others, but it does touch on your own journey too, because we don't, unfortunately, if we're helping others, we're not immune to life's changes and challenges ourselves. So often people in natural disaster impacted areas will have been impacted themselves as well. And so we're trying to build capacity in communities, but we're very mindful that often people coming to the training have been affected. So we're putting in additional supports in those areas. And obviously everyone's been affected by COVID, and we've all got our own journey and story of grief and loss generally. So it's around recognising that and making sure that we look after ourselves, and we really promote that self-care for people that we're working with.
Just the fact that you're actually conscious of the trainers, actually them being potentially facing their own issues and being able to address those at the same time, it sounds like it's really well thought through and an amazing program.
MacKillop Family Services offers support across various states in Australia to children and their families. So they do a lot of family support. They work with a lot of children in out-of-home care and children with additional needs and their families. So there's a wide reach there, and our programmes obviously support more specifically around change, loss and grief. And the power of our programmes really are that we train these amazing people who are working in communities in these roles, teachers, counsellors, chaplains, psychologists, all different roles, and they then roll the programmes out. So every time we do a training, we feel we meet such amazing people who are inspiring in the community, and we kind of hand over this beautiful programme to them, and then we see how that builds on that community support. That's part of their toolkit then to roll out within the communities with the children and the young people and the adults that they meet through their work. So that's really the joy of our role, is that we meet such amazing people who are so passionate about supporting, and it cascades out into that community.
So what is the future like for MacKillop Family Services?
There's always something happening, Tony. I think just thinking back to Mary MacKillop's quote, "Never see a need without doing something about it." We see need all the time, and we stick to what we know, which is grief and loss and change. So we work in that space, not in that initial crisis space where things happen, but that space a little bit later when people are able to sit in that group. It's psychoeducation, it's not a therapy session, it's a small group programme. But we see a lot of need, and that's what I love about the programmes, that they're so gentle, but they're also so accessible, but so meaningful for so many different things in people's lives, because unfortunately the only constant we have is change, and we often don't realise or know what's going to come. So the programme does offer that space where people can sit and gain acknowledgement for what they've been through, but also look at some of the choices they've got going forward. So there's always lots of challenges for people, but there's also lots of opportunities, I think, through the work to embed that language, for example, in schools, make sure that people realise that there is support out there, whatever age you are and whatever journey you're reflecting on. So we work across the spectrum from quite young children to working in aged care settings as well. We've just received some funding to support in that suicide prevention and postvention space, so that's a big project that we're looking at the moment. But we continue our day-to-day work and our training with anybody that's interested in providing that support within their community if they're working in that kind of role or even volunteering. So there's lots of opportunities, I think, lots of challenges, but we meet them head on and look at what we might do in that space. And it's actually really great to think that we've got something that we can offer when challenges do occur for people.
So if someone listening wants to get in touch with Good Grief because they need some help, How do they go about it?
So probably if they can get in touch with us, and then we would signpost them to a local agency that maybe runs the programmes. So, for example, on the Northern Beaches, Lifeline Northern Beaches run our adult programme and our parent programme as well. So they're a good referral point, and they also do amazing work around grief and loss generally in counselling. And then there's a number of schools on the Northern Beaches who run our programmes. If you're thinking you're kind of working in this field and you'd like to run the groups and it might be something you're interested in, then come and have a chat with us and we'll see how we might support you to do the training. We do have some funding that we can access, or you may have funding through your organisation to come and train in the programme, and then we'll support you to get the groups up and running with that implementation. We apply for funding, so we've had, for example, in the flood impacted areas, funding through the local PHNs, primary health networks, local councils, some philanthropy funding. People can come from their individual organisation with their own funding and pay for a spot in the training. We're a not-for-profit, so we try to keep our prices low so it's very accessible, and really our aim is to get the programme out to children, young people and their families and adults who are going, have those changes and losses that they'd like to get support with. So we try to make sure that any groups going out to people, there isn't a charge for that. So it's run through local organisations and communities.
Great. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, they just go onto your website?
Yep. Just
and what's the web address for that?
So it's www.goodgrief.org.au.
So www.goodgrief.org.au. So that's available for anyone that really has that need, or anyone that wants to participate and help out in any way as a potential trained companion.
Yes.
I reckon this is a really good program, and it's really amazing to think of what is available out there for people in the community that are really in need.
Yeah.
And particularly around this is a really pertinent topic of mental health, which is something that's become even more prevalent over the last couple of years with COVID and all the changes and natural disasters that we've had. So Louise, you must feel really proud to work for such a wonderful organisation, and also really the fact that you can make such a difference to other people's lives, and the amazing work that you do. Sincerely thank you for coming onto the program and telling us all about your story and the great work that you do. Thanks, Louise.
Thanks, Tony.
You're listening to In Tune with Tony B on Radio Northern Beaches FM 88.7 and 90.3. You can also live stream at rnb.org.au. And what a great program we've had tonight. We chatted with Louise Hall from MacKillop Family Services, all about their work, which is motivated by Mary MacKillop's principle of never see a need without doing something about it. And if you'd like to come onto the program and talk about your community group or cause, or about your music, please feel free to message us via the Facebook page, which is one word, intune.radio, and please feel free to like and share the page as well. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the program, and we look forward to seeing you same time next week. In the meantime, keep smiling, and bye for now.